representing Israel at the United Nations is probably one of the toughest jobs in the diplomatic world. I remember an event in New York of lighting Hanukkah candles when Mayor Bloomberg introduced me, and he said, "Here comes the lady that has the toughest job in the world." That was just a few months after I came to New York, and I realized that he may be right. Coming from the academia, not being part of the political scene or a member of the diplomatic corps, made, I think, this position even more challenging. Americans don't say difficult, challenging. I must admit that when I first arrived at the United Nations in New York and attended the first meeting of the General Assembly, where the president, Miguel de Soto, he came from Nicaragua, and he gave the opening speech of the General Assembly. That was September 2008. And I was not only surprised, I was appalled, because in a way he declared war on the Western world. And he described Israel and Gaza as the cesspool of the world. And I looked at my deputy, Danny Carmon, and he said, "You'll get used to it." The gaps between things that are being said openly on the podium at the United Nations and things that are said behind the scenes, in the corridors, in private meetings, the hypocrisy, the double standards, what George Orwell called the double talk in 1984, this is something that I really had to educate myself to get accustomed to. In the academia, as you all know, we tutors, lecturers, researchers, we teach our students to look for the truth, the true meaning of things. This is not the case in the United Nations. When I was first appointed, as Dr. Feinstein mentioned, I was after 60 years of independence and after 14 male ambassadors. I was the first woman to be appointed to this position. I was hoping to represent the Israel that we all know and love. Israel beyond the conflict. Israel that is dealing with so many other issues, education, science, state-of-the-art medicine, high-tech. And I think this was also the idea of Prime Minister Olmert and Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni in appointing a woman to change the perception of Israel as a machoistic country led by army generals, to show a different face of Israel. And really, I was hoping at that time, that was September 2008, to come to New York, attend meetings, deal with human rights, children's rights, help to developing countries. Yet the reality was very, very different. Right after my arrival, the situation on the ground changed immediately. I remember a meeting at the Security Council, one of the rituals, quarterly rituals that take place once in 3 months when the Palestinian situation is being discussed in the Security Council. And we are invited to give our speech and then go back and leave the place. And I was sitting next to Robert Seri, the special envoy of Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General to the Middle East. And while he finished his speech, he showed me on his BlackBerry the message that the Hamas declared the end of the Tahadiyah, of the Lul, the end of the ceasefire. Not too long ago, afterwards, 2 days after Christmas, 2008, the CAST-led operation was launched. And since then, my whole agenda changed. I had to dedicate all my time, or almost all my time, to the political agenda. As I reflect now on my 2 years term in New York, I think of dozens of Security Council and General Assembly meetings that I have participated in, hundreds of negotiations and meetings with diplomats from around the world, friends and allies and others, numerous letters of complaint to the Secretary General, to the Security Council, briefings, cables back and forth, and my hope to attend other meetings and to deal with what we call the non-political or the positive agenda did not come into place, unfortunately. Indeed, the United Nations is a worrying place for Israel. Israel is, shall I call it, the enfant terrible of the world. We are outcast in the United Nations. We are the only country in the world where another country from the podium, a leader of another country from the podium, declares or threatens to wipe this country off the map. And at the same meeting that I mentioned, that was opened by Miguel de Escoto, the president, Ahmadinejad spoke. We were not there. The Americans left the place, some European missions, but afterwards we saw on the video that not only did Ahmadinejad gave this venomous speech, but he was accepted with a lot of applause, and when he left the podium, he was hugged, literally hugged by the president of the General Assembly, by the same Miguel de Escoto. But this was not always the case. The United Nations and the State of Israel were founded within 3 years of each other, both born of the ashes of the Second World War and the Holocaust. In the aftermath of the tragedy of war and the horrors of the Holocaust, there were high hopes for a global organization to secure the peace, promote democracy, ensure freedom, and encourage development. Given these values, when the State of Israel was born, its founders envisioned a warm partnership with the United Nations. Indeed, not many people know it, but Israel's Declaration of Independence states, and I quote, "Israel will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations." In the early years of the United Nations, Israel enjoyed a relatively supportive environment at the United Nations. This was due to the fact that the majority of the member states of the world body were democratic and shared Israel's values. We were the 59th state to join the United Nations. Since then, the demographics of the United Nations changed. Today, from 59 at the time that we were accepted, there are now 193 member states. Maybe there will be 194. Out of these 193 member states, over 100 states constitute today what we call the automatic anti-Israel bloc of Muslim states and of the so-called non-aligned states. Democracies lost their majority to autocratic regimes and to newly independent third world nations. One of the things that these countries share is the hostile attitude towards Israel. In fact, most states in our region, along with a growing bloc of other non-democratic countries, view the United Nations as an extension of the battlefield for fighting Israel. Beginning in the late 60s, the full weight of the United Nations was gradually but deliberately turned against Israel. the campaign to demonize and delegitimize Israel in every UN forum was initiated by the Arab states together with the former Soviet Union and was supported by what became to be known the automatic majority of third world member states. This reality means today that the UN is the global center of efforts to delegitimize Israel and the right of the Jewish state to defend itself. We must realize what happened here. Over the years, the Arabs changed their strategy, but their goal did not change. In 1948, 1967, and 1973, Arab countries, Arab armies tried to destroy Israel militarily. They failed. The Arab countries then engaged in economic warfare in the form of embargoes and boycotts. They failed. When both of these strategies failed, we encountered a wave of terrorism. We all remember the days that we could not send our kids on buses. Intended this terror on destroying the fabric of Israeli society. Again, they failed. Yet today, in view of their failure in wars, boycotts, and terrorism, we witness a renewed and vicious phase in the diplomatic battle. Our enemies relentlessly use the United Nations diplomacy and United Nations organs to deny Israel's right to defend its citizens. This diplomatic campaign is the outcome of all other failed attempts to destroy Israel and the Zionist dream. Thus, I found myself at the UN combating a new form of politically correct anti-Semitism disguised in the robes of anti-Zionism. Debate after debate, be it in the General Assembly or in the Security Council, features the most venomous attacks against Israel. UN resolution after resolution embraces the Palestinian narrative that seeks to turn Israel into an illegitimate state. This double standard against Israel within the United Nations is dangerous, as it reflects not a mere criticism of our actions, but an attack on our very legitimacy. And this is what this conference is all about. And really, I congratulate you, the organizer of this very important conference. Just to mention, this hypocrisy is damaging as well because it diverts global attention from truly serious matters that require, as we know, collective action. I'm not going to mention all cases and all human tragedies, some very near to our border, and the human suffering around the globe that the United Nations does not have time, energy, because it is so much engaged with Israel. This hypocrisy, this double standard, this double talk, which is unleashed inside the United Nations, is checked only by one country, Israel's best and closest ally, the United States of America. הלוואי. Freud. Friends, allow me to take this opportunity and thank wholeheartedly Ambassador Daniel Shapiro for the help and support that the United States and its President Obama has offered Israel. Thank you. From my own experience over the 2 troublesome years that I had the privilege of representing Israel at the UN, I can attest that the United States has been our steadfast ally. As Ambassador Shapiro mentioned, over these years, since the White House was taken by the Democratic Party and Susan Rice, the ambassador, came to the United Nations and in a way also changed the attitude of the United States toward the United Nations. Until that time, I can say that America, in a way, was also looked or was a little outcast in the United Nations. I remember Ambassador Bolton was one before Ambassador Khalil Zad, who was there before Susan Rice. They said that he was the second Israeli ambassador because he defended Israel always, and I don't think this changed, but the attitude of the United States toward the United Nations changed. First of all, when Ambassador Susan Rice took office, the United States announced that they are going to pay part of their debt to the United Nations. And I remember a speech that Ambassador Rice delivered. By the way, it was at university, NYU. And she said that the United Nations is imperfect, but indispensable. And the policy of engagement, which we saw through the policy of President Obama and the White House, was also the policy of the United States in the United Nations. And I could see the change in the attitude of so many ambassadors and countries towards the United States, which is not only the leader of the world, but also leading discussions, events in the United Nations. I could see the way that Ambassador Rice is being received by all countries, friends and not only friends. But the cooperation, and this is something that I can attest, the cooperation between our missions, the Israeli and the American mission, was something that cannot even be imagined. My deputy had daily telephone calls or conferences or meetings with the deputy ambassador, Ambassador Alejandro Wolf. We cooperated on every level. Ambassador Shapiro mentioned the Goldstone report, where the United States stood by us in difficult time. The involvement of Ambassador Susan Rice in containing the Mavi Marmara crisis was also unimaginable. And of course, leading in the Security Council the struggle against the nuclear race of Iran, and this was not an easy task given the other members of the permanent members of the Security Council. So even, and I could mention all the events and the examples that you gave, and there are so many others, but even when a resolution was brought to the Security Council, phrased exactly in the words of Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of the State, against the settlements brought by the Palestinians, the American casted their veto, as Ambassador Shapiro explained, because of their idea that no unilateral step will promote the peace or the idea of two states in our region. But this, I think, showed how important is this friendship and cooperation. I must say, in my nightmares, I would sometimes think, where would Israel have been without the support of the United States in the United Nations and elsewhere? In the last 5 minutes, I want to say something positive about our involvement in the United Nations. We speak about challenges, but there are also opportunities regarding what happens to Israel at the United Nations. We are there involved in programs that are not political, they are not as sexy or as interesting, maybe. They do not come to the media, they are not as much interest, and I agree that maybe we should promote more these kind of efforts But they do exist, and they are important. They include education, gender and women's empowerment, agriculture technology, public health, water security, children's rights, and we are engaged in all these issues, and we are able to share our technological advancements with the world. This is not only a part of our agenda in the world and our involvement at the United Nations, but it's also a part of the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, of making or rendering the world a better place. To conclude, what is Israel's future at the United Nations? I know, and again, Ambassador Shafira, we did not coordinate it, but there were many things that you said that I could reiterate. There are voices, I think since Israel joined the United Nations, there are voices that call for us to disengage shmum. Everybody knows this slang. And Ben-Gurion was the one that said it's not important what the Goyim will say, it's important what the Jewish people will do. So there are voices that call for us to walk out from the UN because of the automatic majority, because in a way it gives legitimacy by us sitting there listening, taking part in these events. Truly, we cannot stop the witch hunt against Israel that regularly takes place in the United Nations today. But nor should we walk away from defending our cause in the global arena of the United Nations. The United Nations is a parliament of the world. All states are represented there, 193. And we all know the world is not a perfect place, so how can the parliament of the world be a perfect place? But as Ambassador Rice said, it's indispensable. Our voice needs to be heard clear and strong. Even if we cannot change the attitude of our enemies, we need to strengthen our allies. As sometimes we were told by our friends, help us so that we can help you. So I'm not going to speak about the solution, about promoting peace, but we have to strengthen these voices and explain our friends the need to have strong, democratic Israel and our independent standing in the world. So we shall never desert or neglect the global arena. We must stay and fight back, committed to ensure the safety of the State of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Thank you very much.